Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run for the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. It is going to be progressively turning drier, and it is going to be turning pretty mild as we head into the weekend and the start of next week. Some could argue it's even a little bit of a taste of spring. Now proper spring is unlikely to arrive at least for another 6 weeks or so, but we could see little hints of sort of low to mid-teens in places. We have seen low teens earlier this week, but it was accompanied by a lot of rain and cloud and wind, with, of course, the two named storms. But if we do see these milder temperatures next week, it's actually going to be accompanied by drier conditions. So that's why it could actually feel a little bit like spring in there. However, as we'll see on the longer range charts, it is still winter, so those temperatures will likely drop as we progress into early February. Especially the GFS is hinting at the risk of colder weather returning. A lot of spread within the ensemble members, but there are a significant number going back down below average, back towards the -5 to -10 degrees at 850 HPA, which would be cold enough for those temperatures to be in the low single digits in the day, overnight, of course, well below freezing, and of course, bringing the risk of snow again. Still hints at this stage, and still in the longer term, but for the foreseeable future, it is looking, as I said, pretty mild and relatively dry, especially through the weekend starting next week. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you start by having a look at the live radar, you can see it actually has been a relatively dry day for many today. Still got cloud around and still a few showers across Scotland, but most areas, as I said, relatively mild today and pretty dry indeed. Now, I'm recording this around 4:30, and you can see the temperatures are generally average to above average. Yellows around, indicating temperatures into the double digits. Of course, cooler over higher ground, and the further northwards you go. But relative speaking, it is a pretty mild day for the middle to end of January. Typically, this is the time of year where we can see our coldest weather, because we still have got very short days, so lots of cold potential with especially the overnight temperatures. But of course, in the northern hemisphere in general, we are sort of at the peak time for cold in terms of those upper air temperatures, because it's normally the coldest time of the year, or subsequently warmest time of the year. Does lag, of course, the shortest day of the year and the longest day of the year by about a month to 6 weeks. That's where we are around now. So typically, this should be the coldest part of the year. But right now, it's relatively mild out there. Now, over the coming days, as we can see from the latest UKV, there will be rain around still, but it shouldn't be anywhere near as disruptive as it has been over the last couple of days, with, of course, the two named storms that we've seen, Storm Isha and Storm Jocelyn. Of course, Jocelyn moving through last night, so winds are going to be dying down. Rain is going to become less widespread, and it is going to be gently turning quite a bit better for all. As said, though, through today, we will continue to see those showers further northwards and some cloud around, and as we head into tomorrow, there is the risk of a period of heavy rain further northwards. As I said, it's not going to be bone dry in the next couple of days. It's towards the weekend and next week where things could be a little bit spring-like. But as I said, through Thursday, the rainfall does start to clear, and it will be cloudy and drab in places, but really nothing too bad, especially compared to what we've seen in the past week or so. Beyond that, as we head into Friday, we actually do see the risk of some more widespread, pretty heavy rain moving in. We're actually seeing quite a strong low pressure system move in, nowhere near as strong as the storms we've seen, but winds could gust up to 40 or 50 miles per hour again, and we could see some heavy rain overnight. But into Friday, once that rain clears, we will see showers, but it'll actually be relatively decent. Yes, fresher air, so we will feel a little bit chillier, but of course that fresher air brings drier air, so we'll actually see less clouds. You see a lot of clear skies here, with a few showers further northwards. And then slowly into the weekend, yes, rain starts to try and push back in from the north and the west, but you can see how the rainfall is attacking us further northwards and gently from the northwesterly direction. And that is because the jet stream has pushed further northwards as higher pressure is building in. So it is pretty typical that areas across Northern Ireland and maybe Western Scotland could still see bits and bobs of rain through the weekend and start of next week. As you can see here, those areas of rainfall still just about getting in, but never progressing further southwards and eastwards, or never progressing southwards and eastwards substantially. You can see a big area of rain moves through there on Sunday, but it just diminishes over the Irish Sea coming up against the higher pressure. So you can see it is a little bit of a fight, but for most, it is going to be turning drier and going to be turning milder with those upper air temperatures moving in from the south. Now you can see this on the mean sea level pressure, westerly winds over the coming days, but as we head into Saturday, you can see the reds, which is higher pressure, is starting to build northwards, and you can see that wind direction veers more from a southerly, which will push in pretty warm air for the time of year and will hold those weather fronts and cooler air masses out in the North Atlantic. And that is the pattern all the way to day 10. And you can even see the high pressure actually expands itself into Monday, and those isobars do spread out. So it could be setting up for quite a mild, dry, and pleasant couple of days next week. Those upper air temperatures are starting to warm up as well. You can see colder air is trying to push in, and colder air is in initially through Friday. But because it is a polar maritime air mass, it's not going to take too much of a dent to the surface temperatures, maybe just trending us back towards average for a day or so. But it's as we head into Sunday and the start of next week, colder air is trying to move in from the north, but it's getting pushed away by the warm air that's getting wafted up by the higher pressure system as we head into Monday. And we can see this better on some of the longer range charts and the ensembles in a minute. If you do have a look at those raw 2 metre temperatures, you can see today generally average to above average, getting towards the double digits in some areas further southwards. And then as we progress into Thursday, could be a little bit chilly further northwards and eastwards, but again into the afternoon, getting into the double digits, 12 or 13 degrees as that milder air starts pushing from the southwest. Into Friday, as I said, that cooler air does move in for a time, so it could be a little bit chilly in the mornings. By the afternoon, it's more around the average mark, around the sort of 5 to 8 degrees. But that is going to be sort of the bottom temperatures we're going to see in the next week. Into the weekend, temperatures start to rise again, especially as that wind starts to shift. Saturday, still a little bit chilly in places, but more toward that 7, 8, 9 degree mark. By Sunday, temperatures starting to rise further, 10, 11, 12 degrees. And we must remember that these temperatures are not being accompanied by rain and wind. We've seen these temperatures earlier this week, but it's under the rain, wind, cloud, so it doesn't feel that great. But with a bit of sunshine and some dry conditions, 10, 12 degrees is going to feel significantly milder than the below freezing temperatures we saw a week ago, and of course the very stormy conditions we've seen over the past 3 or 4 days. And then finally into Monday, you can see the warmer air mass starting to take over, because further southwards in the overnight hours, not getting below 7 or 8 degrees. So yeah, it could be turning really quite mild as we head into the early part of next week. If you look at the latest GFS, you can see that we've got a general westerly flow at the moment. High pressure is trying to push in, but it's not having great success up against the lows. Now, this GFS is just coming out, so we won't be able to go all the way to the 384-hour point, but we'll be able to get out to the sort of reliable time frame out towards day 10 and beyond. You can see, though, into the weekend, that high pressure does start to push in and actually does dominate conditions, perhaps for Monday and Tuesday next week. We do need to watch for these little kinks in the isobars. We could see little lows develop there, which could build further cloud and rain, but uncertainty with the development of that. But at least for a couple of days, could be going a lot milder and a lot drier, and a little bit of spring conditions there. But the low pressure is inevitably going to push back through. It is winter, of course, and the jet stream is looking pretty strong. So low pressure is going to come back in, but high pressure never goes far away from our south. So the further south as you are, the drier and probably milder it will be. Right towards the extended range, we do start to see a little bit of a shift. The lobes of tropospheric polar vortex do start to distort a little bit, and we do start to see a little bit more amplification in the jet stream. Nothing huge to indicate any major pattern change, but just tentative signs that into early February things could be a little bit different. Perhaps not the flat westerlies that look pretty likely over the next week or two, with brief areas of higher pressure bumping up from the south, bringing in a few milder, drier days, like we're going to see early next week. Now, with the air masses, you can see we've got some very cold air to our north, but very mild air to our south, and we're going to sort of be oscillating between those air masses, but probably more biased towards those milder upper air temperatures. You can see into early next week, we do pull up that really quite warm air mass for a time there. The GFS does have that warm air mass taking over for at least a couple of days next week, especially further southwards. And that's where we could see 10, 12, maybe even 13, 14, 15 degrees, and being drier as well. It could actually be pretty decent indeed. And of course, after that, we do see fresher air masses push in for a time, but it is going to be oscillating above and below average, but mostly will probably be above If you look at the GM over the next 10 days, again, we see westerly winds continue to push over the coming days, but as we head into next week, you can see that higher pressure building in, and it's actually got a pretty far-fetched southerly wind there, so pretty mild indeed, before the low pressure starts to nudge back in by Tuesday, Wednesday time, successfully pushing through Wednesday afternoon, but could be 2 days, 3 days there of relatively warm conditions. Beyond that, as we head towards day 10, again, we do see a little bit of a change. More amplification of the jet stream, the lobes of polar vortex split up a bit. We actually do end day 10 here with a bit of a northerly wind. It's not that cold if you look at the upper air temperatures. It's slightly below average. We'll probably bring a bit of frost and potentially a few wintry showers. Nothing major, as the air across Scandinavia isn't particularly cold right now because of the westerly winds. That's where all the milder air ends up, is up towards Scandinavia. So it's unlikely to be particularly cold at this stage. But nevertheless, a bit of a change there at day 10 from the GM. Nothing crazy, but one to watch as it could develop further into the early part of February. Now to finish by looking at the ECMWF, again westerly winds continue to push in over the coming days. That high pressure builds in for early next week, and you can see the ECMWF has it dominating through to about Tuesday, Wednesday time before we do see a weak area of low pressure move through. Even then, that low pressure does get squeezed out, could bring a bit of cloud and rain before the high pressure does build back in. Eventually, lower pressure does start to push back through towards the day 10 mark, but for southern areas, it could actually be very dry and pretty mild here. We'll look at the accumulated precipitation. As I said, western Scotland and Northern Ireland could see a lot of rain here, but for southern areas, looking pretty dry indeed. Again, this is one ECMWF run, and other runs will have a lot more rainfall depending on where that high pressure low pressure divide is, but ECMWF definitely suggesting a pretty mild and relatively dry pattern as we head into the longer term. You can see that with these upper air temperatures as well, potentially getting up towards the 5 or even 10 degree isotherm mark, which is incredibly mild indeed. You can see that from the 10 meter these AM50 HBA temperature deviations here, getting up towards 10 to 12 degrees above average. If you just looked at that in isolation, you'd be saying a bit of a heat wave is arriving, but I don't think it's responsible to be calling it a heat wave, and it might max out at 14 or 15 degrees. If you actually look at those surface temperatures, you can see actually nothing too mild here, at least initially, because of the wind direction, but potentially, as I said here, getting towards that 12, 13, 14 degree mark at times. It is going to be very much dependent on positioning of the high, little areas of rain and cloud, but in this sort of overall pattern, the overall synoptics, it looks very plausible. We could be seeing some pretty mild conditions indeed into next week. If you look at the latest ensemble, you can see this well reflected up and down over the next sort of 3 or 4 days, and then you can see it shoot up to around the 5 to 10 degree mark at 850 HPA by the weekend, and it kind of holds there before slowly dropping off. So you can see it is pretty dry as well, pretty minimal precipitation and relatively mild upper air temperatures. So that's where we could see a little bit of spring conditions. But as those upper air temperatures drop, we do see low pressure move back in. Low pressure is causing that change in air mass, and of course there'll be more precipitation. So yes, the upper air temperatures don't drop off too much, but it will introduce cooler, fresher air in general, and rain and cloud. As I said, into the longer term, GFS is definitely potentially hinting at a bit of a pattern change into the first full week of February. Quite a few runs getting towards the -5 or even -10 region, which is cold, if not very cold. So it is one to watch, but we're not seeing a huge amount of support at this stage. Just hints in the longer term. Once we get through the next few days, if that signal is still there and it strengthens, then maybe we'll start to talk about it with more detail. But at this stage, it's just hints, and we'll just have to keep a very close eye on it. Definitely, sort of the overall weather patterns do suggest that cold weather could return into February, but it will all be dependent on that big lobe of stratospheric polar vortex towards Greenland. If that doesn't move, then there is a very low chance we see anything remotely cold in towards the next sort of few weeks, and perhaps if it stays there all winter and all February, then potentially we're going to see no more proper cold towards the next couple of weeks and months. And if it stays there all the way to the end of February, then potentially we don't see anything majorly cold for the rest of the meteorological winter. If you do compare to the ECMWF, again, this is the midnight run. It is looking very mild next week. Temperatures actually even higher, towards the 11, 12, 13 degree mark. If we were seeing 15 degrees, if that was falling in June or July, we would suggest the possibility of even 30 degrees. So that does show you the strength of air mass being observed here. A good 10 plus degrees above average, slowly dropping off, and precipitation slowly picking up into early February, and again hints into early February, or around the 5th, 6th, 7th of colder conditions returning. But you can see still the ensemble mean is average to above average, so it is still one to keep an eye on, but nothing in the next sort of 10 days. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you are looking for a bit more uneventful weather, then the next week or two is looking good. Don't have any weather warnings issued at the moment, and I'm probably unlikely to see any major weather warnings issued for the next week or two from the looks of this. It is going to be generally above average, and it could actually be very mild and potentially even very dry for some southern areas, especially into next week. So if you are looking forward to something a little bit brighter, a little bit sunnier, and a little bit warmer, then potentially that is coming up in the next week or so. So I said, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.